There it goes. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the Facebook group here. So this is our group, and it's smaller compared to some of the other groups, but it's growing pretty quick. And I think we have pretty good moderation. Like, we've got a team of admins that do a good job moderating, and we tried to get like good information and put that on here, and get thought leaders, like as I said, have good events, interactive events with thought leaders like Glenn Cheriton, for example. And we have good rules, I think, that we actually enforce. So we don't have a lot of spam and advertisements from people that just want to exploit like all the vulnerable parents in the terrible position that they're in. So we don't have advertising and spam, things like that. We enforce respect. We don't have, we try to stay as supportive and positive as we can, and try to build relationships in the community with lawyers and social workers, and try to spread good information. Okay, so that's a bit about our group, and I'm just going to return now, and let's see if I can get this to work. So I'm going to introduce Glenn Cheriton. I'll let him introduce himself, what he does, and his organization, but he came into my radar. He's well known in the sphere of family law and parental alienation and shared parenting, and so I thought it was really important that we get this recording with him today, and kind of have a chance to ask him some of these important questions that we need to talk about. So Glenn, do you want to introduce yourself? Do you want to turn yourself off mute and introduce yourself?
Mute. Okay. Yes, well, first of all, Monique, I wanted to honor what you've been doing and what Parental Alienation Canada has been doing. What you're doing is important work, and certainly parents going through those types of challenges need that kind of support. And that's it's really important that you continue what you're doing, because there's a great need out there.
Yes, there is.
Now what I am, I'm the president of a national parent advocacy organization called the Canadian Equal Parenting Council. So it's a federally chartered nonprofit, and we've been going for over 17 years now, and we've been advocating for parents, and in particular, we're looking to change, as we say, the law and the practice, so that no fit parent loses their children to our family law system, or to government interference. And certainly, as part of what we're trying to do, we certainly find that parental alienation is a big factor and an important issue. And relating to what we're trying to do here is, of course, we're trying to prevent and eliminate parental alienation through the change of the law, as we say, the law and the practice of family law in Canada.
Mm-hmm. So can you explain what is shared parenting? Because it's amazing how many people don't even know what that is. Like, is equal parenting or shared parenting, and how does it relate to parental alienation? Like, can you elaborate on that and explain that really clearly?
Sure. Well,
how is it different, and how is it different from our current system also?
Well, the current system, as I'm sure a lot of the parents will say, is that they go into the family court system, hire lawyers, and you fight about it in an adversarial system that pretends to act in the best interests of children. But in fact, what usually happens is one parent effectively ends up with the control over the parenting time of the other. So effectively, what happens is, first of all, one parent effectively is no longer sharing the rights and responsibilities of parenting. One parent has all of the authority there. And then the second thing that happens is that parents are treated unequally. So if they go to the schools, one is treated as a non-custodial parent, the other parent is treated as the real parent. So the problem with the current system is this inequality, and the fact that it is designed as a winner-take-all, as a a win-lose system, as all adversarial legal systems are. So it's designed to eliminate one parent, just as the native residential schools was designed to eliminate, Aboriginal parents from the lives of their children. So what we currently talk about is equal shared parenting. So it's not enough to have shared parenting if the parents are unequal. So both parents have to have reasonably equal time, and they have to have the same rights. There's no reason why you should take a child away from a parent unless that a parent is clearly unfit or that parent is a real danger to the child. So what we're trying to do is keep both parents in the lives of their children. And this is certainly possible, as a lot of other jurisdictions and countries have shown. It's possible in the overwhelming majority of cases.
Okay, so shared parenting or equal parenting, if we had that in Canada, that would be, so we would assume after a separation or divorce, we would just assume that there would be 50-50 default equal shared parenting. And
Right.
that there, like in Sweden, like we see in a racing family, like they don't even have any adversarial system. It's just a form. They're separating and they share custody of their son, and there's like no drama, and they
Right.
just split and then the children split their time between both parents. And it would seem like it'd be very onerous to have to like pack up and have to go to both parents, but actually the children seem to be buffered by having access to both parents, and so they don't lose any part of their family. Like there's no disturbance really to their parental relationships, because the children are not being divorced from their parents. It's just the parents that are separating.
Exactly. You've exactly got it right, Monique. You may be interested, listeners may be interested in generally how they do it in Europe, is they call it essentially two homes. So once the parents separate, the government recognizes both homes of the child with both parents. So as soon as you recognize both homes equally, then it means that the school has to recognize both homes, and the doctors for medical services and all other child services, these services have to recognize both of the homes of the child, which automatically makes both parents equal. So the point is that there's a lot of different ways of doing it. And in various other states, including, for example, in the US, there's, I think, at least 3 different approaches to it. One of them is the presumption of equal shared parenting, which is what they have in Kentucky. And then there is the starting point approach of Arizona, which has been going on for quite some time. And you're right that those jurisdictions in Europe and those states in the US show the same benefits, both for parents and for children and for the governments, in reduced cost that you see in all of the areas that have adopted some form of equal shared parenting.
Okay, and can you be very specific about how the concept of equal shared parenting relates to parental alienation?
Yes, what happens, certainly our approach to parental alienation is to recognize that it is a form of abuse. It's abuse of both the parent and of the child.
Yes.
Now, how you prevent that, and it comes down to what is in the current law is called coercive and controlling behavior. So essentially, one parent starts to coerce the child into an unreasonable, an unbased hatred and a dislike of the other parent. So it's once you have generally what you need for that kind of abuse to happen is you have to have a power differential between the parents. And if you start off where one parent essentially has de facto sole custody or control, then you start to have that parent greater likelihood of starting to alienate the child from the parent, from the other parent. So it's the fact that if you start off with both parents being equal and both in authority, then you recognize that it makes it a lot more difficult for a parent to alienate the child,
Okay.
because both parents are involved with the child. Both parents, their time is recognized. If the equality of parents and their shared parenting is the starting point, then it makes it much more difficult for one parent to grab the child and head off to another jurisdiction, because that violates the presumption at the start that both parents are equal and both parents have authority.
Okay. That's great. So what is the Canadian Equal Parenting Council? Like, what is the purpose of the organization?
Well, the purpose of the organization is to implement equal shared parenting in the law and the practice.
Okay.
It's also to advocate for parents in a variety of issues, including parental alienation. So we represent the interests of parents. When governments say that parents have no rights, we stand up and say, this is not, it's not right. So the Charter guarantees certain rights for people in this country, and there's nothing in the Charter that says that government can take away those rights. There's a recognition as well that if you have responsibility for your children, you need rights. One of those is due process before government steps in and change that. So a lot of what we're trying to do is essentially advocate for parents, and so that they are kept in full parenting roles with their children.
Yeah, so I read a clipping from the response of the Bar Association to the last shared parenting bill, and they said that parents have no rights, and because the court is in the best interest of the children. But there's a lot of nuance missing with that. So like on the surface of that sort of makes sense that they're saying, okay, well, we don't care about parents, we're only caring about the children. But if you're actually like with the assumption that both parents are competent and both parents are sharing custody, then you would have like the same way we would have like, generally sympathy for a mother, and understanding that the mother wants the best for her child, and that we should be giving her her parental rights. We should have that for fathers. And so they're making it sound like parents want to abuse their children. Like there's a lot of subtext to that when they say that, parents have no rights. That I think is a lot of false assumptions. And so when I think of parenting rights, I think of parenting rights as the right to be a parent and be part of their children's lives. And I think of it as very positive rights that, that the parent has the best interest of the child, much more than any government entity ever will. The state, the parent always has much more of a vested interest in their child than the state does, I would say.
Well, certainly this is true. And you can't ask people to take the responsibility for their children if you say at the same time you have no rights. It's kind of like if you said to somebody, look, you have the responsibility to vote, but you got no right to actually walk into the polling booth.
Yes, it's true.
You
that
have
reminds
to take
me,
responsibility for the children. But I think it's in fact, it's a lot more insidious than what you have said, because the legal profession there, they say, oh yes, the courts are acting in the best interests of children than lawyers are. But if you look at the site for the lawyers, the Bar Association, they say, we act in the interests of our members, which are lawyers.
yes.
So they're not telling the truth when they claim that, the Bar Association is acting in the interests of children. It's completely untrue, in the same sense that with the native residential schools, the claims that those schools were acting in the interests of the children, they made those same claims. And now we're recognizing with the deaths of large numbers of children in there that this wasn't true.
Well,
in fact,
the Erasing Family documentary pointed out the huge conflict of interest that the Bar Association has, because it's $1 billion industry. A high conflict divorce generates a lot of income for the lawyers. They are interested in having, telling the woman, why don't you just say he hit you or something? We can wrap this up, so like, false accusations, and this drama in the court back and forth, and the conflict will obviously, generate a lot of dollars. And if all you have to do is fill out a form, and you don't even need a lawyer, and you can get, there's no drama, and you just, you separate from your spouse, and there's automatic separation, and there's no money to be made for the lawyers, honestly. So
right. Well, certainly the problems that parents are facing is the fact that there is an industry that's making, as you say, billions of dollars off the suffering of parents and children
Yes.
and plundering the assets of the family, which of course, the evidence is very clear. I mean, we have a vast amount of social science evidence showing that the current system, the adversarial system, it doesn't work. It doesn't do anything that it's been claiming, and it certainly does not act in children's interest. Although, certainly the evidence is very strong that joint custody, which essentially is the same as equal shared parenting,
Yeah,
basically the
well,
same thing,
there's like
that is in
yeah,
children's interest.
there's a huge like deluge of like misinformation that's being spread by certain lobby groups. There's a couple lobby groups that don't want shared parenting, and I think that they have different interests than the silent majority of us that just want to have access to our our kids, and we'd rather have a peaceful and amicable divorce with like just separate, it's between the partners and they both should have access to the kids, and that's what most people want, I think. And like no one wants to pay huge legal fees. No one wants to get into a high conflict divorce unless they've got a personality disorder, I'd say. So what is the history of shared parenting bills in Canada?
Well, there's been two equal shared parenting bills that we have sponsored in
So
the
that's at your organization.
our organization, yeah,
Yeah.
through, of course,
What years
member
were
of
those?
Parliament. Well, the first one was in 2009, Bill 422, C422, and they called an election before that was able to come to a vote. The second one was C560, which was came to, it passed the first vote in the Parliament and was defeated on the second vote in Parliament. Now, essentially, what we had done is we had advocated and worked with groups all across the country to get a shared parenting policy into the Conservative Party of Canada. We also worked to get an equal parenting policy in the Green Party of Canada too. We passed both of those, and that became official party policy. Unfortunately, with the second bill, that's what happened was that we got support from the vast majority of Conservative members of Parliament. It was opposed by the NDP and opposed by the Bloc and the Liberals, but in fact, it got support from the leader of the Green Party at that time, Elizabeth May. But unfortunately, Stephen Harper caved into some rather extreme vested interests who threatened him going.
I've seen some of the misinformation campaigns at these lobby groups. Like they don't represent the majority of us. And I've seen, and what they've done is like there's this Meyer study that is totally nonsense, and she's claimed that PA is an excuse that child abusers use to get out of, so they can get out of their accusations and say, well, I'm being alienated from my child. And so she spread this, and she says that her research proves it. But Christine Giancarlo, she's an expert on parental alienation. She gave me a table explaining everything that was wrong with that study and then compared it to a reputable study, the Harman study. And so there is no evidence that abusers actually, child abusers, and abusers actually use PA as a defense. Yet when I Google this, like all I see on the internet, like is this misinformation about PA. Oh, it's very common, like if a child abuser, they use this as an excuse. And I went on to the LEAF website, the feminist website that got PA taken off, parental alienation taken off the UN index. They had the same nonsense. They were saying that this is PA is an excuse for paternal abusers of children, and that's why they had, and they were successful at taking the PA, parental alienation, off the index, even though this Meyer study is complete nonsense. So it's just amazing how much power these lobby groups have. And they represent a very small, shrill minority of the majority of us, and they don't represent the majority's best interest, and they certainly don't represent our children's best interest. And so, but yeah, like this nonsense and this misinformation has, like, if I've talked to so many social services here in my city, and they all repeat the misinformation campaign, because these lobby groups are very aggressive about spreading the misinformation. So one of the reasons why I'm having this conversation with you and trying to spread information and show a racing family and get out good information is so that I can educate and inform as many people as possible about the correct information, and perhaps we won't be a silent majority anymore, and we will be able to get a shared parenting, equal parenting bill, and we'll be able to stop this mental health problem.
Right. Well, certainly there's a mental health issue here, and there's also these people who oppose inclusion of parental alienation in the recognized child abuse.
Yeah, they say that it's like they quote like fake studies that have been debunked, and it's very hard for this misinformation to be contained, because I don't know, like I Google it and it's like all over the internet, and even in my group, like I've gotten into like, conversations with people that actually are on the opposite side of this of me, and they're in my group, and they are posting this same stuff, like, oh, PA is a defensive and abusers, and I will post the and I'll show everything that's wrong with the study, and they just double down on their claims. And so it's very ideological, and I think that there's like obviously plenty of money to be made by certain special interest groups, and they're just defending their turf, I think, and they really don't have the interest of children in mind, best interest in children in mind, in my opinion.
Right. It's a lot about money and careerism.
Yeah.
For these people, but I think there is one thing that I think is a real opportunity for us advocates on the side of parents and children, and that is that there was a law that was passed in 2018, and it essentially was included in that law. Was a new change to the child abuse factors. And what they included in that was coercive and controlling behavior.
Okay.
Now, there isn't a connection of coercive and controlling behavior and recognition directly that parental alienation is coercive and controlling. And yet it seems pretty obvious to me, and that there have actually been some recent court judgments. Now, this bill, even though it was passed in 2018, was only recognized, and put into law in March of this year, because it was deferred off because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's provinces who are implementing some version of this into their laws to keep it coincident with most of the federal legislation. So there's an opportunity to present the idea that parental alienation is coercive and controlling behavior and should be recognized by the courts. And I think that, there have been judges who have recognized and used the word coercive and controlling for parental alienation. So I think you will find that this is the next battleground. And I think the people on the other side are going to have great difficulty in suggesting that coercive and controlling behavior, as they do, is say that is only when men do it. And when women are so-called protecting children by trying to keep the father away and he hasn't done anything wrong, that suddenly they're not coercive and controlling.
Yeah.
But in fact, that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
I try to stay gender neutral though, because we have a lot of moms that have been alienated in the Facebook group too. There is, I've been in men's issues at CAFE and the CCMF for about 5 or 6 years now. And I would say that women get sole custody most of the time, and it's usually men that don't get the custody. So I wouldn't be surprised if because of that's why there's more dads alienated. I mean, there could be, I don't know if there's any numbers or like if anybody's keeping any numbers of it, but my point is that both fathers and mothers can be alienators, and both parents could be like the target parent. And so,
Right.
yeah, and it's totally gender neutral, like, and I'm sure it could happen in like LGBT parents too, or like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's about the parent having nothing to do with gender. It has something to do with the parent being abusive and having like abusive personality disorder, like a narcissist or something, and using their own child as a pawn, as a tool to get revenge or get back at an ex. And so, and then the child loses half their family. Not just the parent, but like the extended family, like the grandparents, and all the love and support from that whole side of the family. And so,
Right. Well, certainly you're right that it happens to mothers, it happens to fathers, it happens to grandparents. It actually happens also to other relatives too.
yes,
People don't stop just with an ex-spouse. And in fact, the people on the other side, certainly they make an amazing effort to make this into a gender issue. But in fact, having mothers who are willing to say, look, that this is coercive and controlling behavior, and women do it, men do it, it's my ex doing it. This is important to get away from. Men and women working together is the biggest threat to the ideology and
yes,
self-interest on the other side.
yes.
And
That was
so
why
the
I made the
solution,
group gender neutral. I have men from the fathers' rights movement in my group, and there are plenty of smears against them, and I defend them because they have the same parental rights. They shouldn't be, fathers are not second-class parents, like they're equal parents to mothers, as far as I'm concerned. And if they don't have a voice, and they have a right to organize themselves informally, if they've been deplatformed, like they have a right to organize themselves, into these fathers' rights groups. And then I also have mothers and that have been alienated, and I'm not sure if we have any LGBT or like any like non-traditional families, like but I think it doesn't matter, like if there's a two-parent home and then the child loses half their family after a divorce for no good reason, then that's it doesn't matter about the gender, like it's a loss for the child, and very devastating.
right. Well, certainly one of the principles of CEPC, our organization, is that we stand up for mothers, we stand up for fathers equally. We stand up for, it doesn't matter whether parents are, lesbian or heterosexual. We stand up for grandparents. It doesn't matter whether, what religion they are. All parents should have the same rights and responsibilities.
Yes.
So that's, the aim. If I can suggest that I'm a little uncomfortable with gender neutral, but I am much more comfortable with gender inclusive.
Okay. Well, I just said gender neutral because I don't think that it matters, like like some people will say they're non-binary these days, and there's a lot of but like I'm just saying that however you express yourself, like if you're a parent and you love your child and you're a good parent, then you should be part of your child's life, and you shouldn't have the government or the state take away your rights for some ideology purposes. So I just wanted to ask, like, it says on your website that the CEPC is that you have like you're actually like a collection of smaller organizations. And I
Right.
couldn't find a list, but I was just wondering, like, is that a mixture of Canadian and American, or like international organizations? Like, what are some examples of this collection? So you guys all get together and then you form the council, I suppose? Like, do you have a list of what the smaller organizations are?
Well, I certainly can describe some of the organizations. These
Okay.
are, women's organizations. They are fathers' organizations. They're grandparents' organizations. They are all Canadian organizations
Okay.
that are our members. Although we do have very strong liaison with other organizations internationally, such as the International Council on Shared Parenting, and also with the National Parents Organization in the US, but they're not formally members of us as an organization.
Okay, so it's totally
We do have,
Canadian organization.
it's Canadian, yes.
Oh
We
yeah.
have organizations that provide support to parents. Certainly, we have Canadian Council for Co-Parenting. We have Grand Society, which is a grandparents organization, Leading Women for Shared Parenting, ANCQ, which is Association des Nouveaux Conjoints du Québec. So it's Quebec-based second wives organizations, but includes fathers in there. Certainly, we work with a number of organizations such as CAFE. We work with organizations such as Real Women of Canada, which arguably is a much larger organization than we are. So, because they have 30,000 members or so. So we work with anyone who sort of supports what our aims are.
Okay. Is there a list? Like, I didn't see a list. I was just like, I thought that would be interesting to have a list of all the organizations that are actually part of your council. But
Sure. Well, essentially, the list comes out when each year we have an annual general meeting, and those member organizations elect a board to manage Canadian Equal Parenting Council. So essentially, it's a board which manages this during the time. And then the board selects a president, and that's me. I have to set the aims and motivate people and represent the organization when it comes down to presenting to the federal parliament. And we do a fair amount of actually lobbying of political parties and politicians to try to get them to support things that work for children and parents.
Okay, so how can people volunteer or donate to the Canadian Equal Parenting Council? Like, and how can they help like support the games? Like, we could probably all advocate in our own communities, I suppose. We could do that and talk about what you're doing.
Right. Well, essentially, there's two areas. I mean, you asked about donations. If they go to our website, CanadianEPC.org, and then go to /donate, you'll find a donation form there. Or, people can phone me. My phone number is on the website, and I'll work out whatever people want to do as far as, making a donation. As far as joining up, they can join we have a good social media group, Facebook and Twitter. We're doing a lot of that these days. And there's also a sign up form on our website, essentially. So what we're looking for is we do a lot more work around political action, raising these issues during an election campaign. And I think there's a federal election campaign coming up. So what we try to do is it's a good time to talk to politicians and parties to get them to commit to doing things for parents as opposed to catering to
special interest groups.
Special interest groups, yes.
Yes. So your organization, like the council itself, like you have several elected members, and then there's these other organizations that are members. But can individuals become a member and vote for the president and like come to those annual meetings too? Or do you have to?
Well, everybody can come to the annual meeting. As we're a federation of member organizations, essentially it's the delegates from the member organizations that select the board. Now, certainly in some cases, we've actually, if a person is really active and keen, then we can bring them onto the board during the year. So it's not just at the annual general meeting. And certainly nothing prevents people from working with us. And I think people will find that we're very open to working with anybody on virtually any terms. But the one thing that is important in dealing with a political action is your ability to work with others. Is an absolute key. So if people
communication skills, probably.
Well, communication skills, the ability to what we call is keeping the tone right. If you can go in there and sit down with a politician and have them like you, even though they may not agree with you, and they will meet you again, then to my mind, you've kept the tone right. So you have to go in there and present the case for equal shared parenting and changing the system without getting without threatening the MP or member of parliament, without getting the tone wrong. In other words, if if people sometimes think, okay, well, I'll influence this politician by threatening, I've never voted for you before, or something like that. Well, you have to have a little bit of diplomacy
Yes,
and
that would make sense.
political
Yeah,
skills.
yeah. Well, you can't change someone's mind by threatening them.
Well, exactly. I mean, the
That's not gonna
evidence
work.
is strong for us. The public opinion, and I think this is key, is that I think we're way beyond, public awareness. We've done public opinion support studies that show that these surveys show that 83% of the Canadian public that's decided on these issues supports equal shared parenting.
Yes.
So we have the public on our side. It's just a small group of vested interests who've been resorting to the most outrageous lies to block this. So, and I think it's something that I've noticed over the years is that their lies have gotten more outrageous, and, frankly, ridiculous. When we were last in the parliament, they were saying, okay, well, joint custody, it's never been done anywhere. But of course, we showed that it had been. We said that there's no social science evidence to support it. And of course, there's an overwhelming body of that. And then they said, well, the places that have tried it, they reversed it. And that's not true either. So the claims that they're making are contradictory. They are irrational and getting more and more irrational.
Well, they're defending their turf. They have like they have a monetary interest in keeping the status quo, and it will be a loss of power and money for them, and so they're not very happy, about even though like there's like they said, they're a shrill minority, and they're extreme. It seems like they're very powerful and very influential. Like you mentioned that, so I'm trying to offer a service, I suppose, at the Parental Alienation Canada support group, because I saw a need for like a pan-Canada kind of service, and I'm trying to collect like a list of localized services, because a lot of people need help with family law. So there's the need for advocacy, obviously, that you're doing, but what about like services to actually support the people that are hurting right now, like services for parents? I have been volunteering at the Canadian Center for Men and Families for years now, and they have, especially in Alberta, like for our local branch, like there's branches across Canada, but those are services are for men. And we do have ECMAS here in Edmonton, and so family law goes by provincial jurisdiction generally, and I think the territories like kind of piggyback off the closest province they got. So for example, Northwest Territories uses the same system as Alberta for family law, so they can use our services. And our services aren't bad compared to some of the other provinces, but like what kind of services do you think, if we had services to support parents right now in the situation that they're in, like probably we would need like low cost, like legal information and helping parents self-represent, because the lawyer fees are just like, I think family law is the most expensive type of law. So yeah, so I'm interested in the long-term goal, but I'm also interested in helping parents right now. I wouldn't be surprised if suicide rates are tied to this, especially in men. But
right. Well, there certainly is a fellow in England who's done some remarkable research, tying male suicide to the abuse and problems that these guys have, that the government is
you need to forward that
covering
to me,
up.
because people have been asking me for that, for research that shows the link between family law and suicide, the abuse of others. Yeah.
So that I will get you that link. That fellow, he's done some absolutely remarkable research on that. And there's some in Canada that goes back a ways, but it's getting a little old now. But the situation is not improved. But what I'm going to suggest is that there's difference between, advocacy and support. I mean, a lot of the member organizations are essentially support organizations. So there's a strong rationale for having an organization such as CEPC, which does the advocacy and the political change side.
Yes.
And then you have organizations that are members that stick to the support side. That's not a requirement, but it's certainly, if in fact you are a an organization trying to do support for parents, essentially inevitably to raise money, you probably have to get into becoming a charity so you can give tax deductions. So if you're going to be a charity and do tax deductions, you can't do the type of political advocacy that we do, because the
Yeah.
government will shut you down and you can't get involved in elections.
I also,
I think,
yeah, there's also like usually the people that are in that situation, you know, and dealing with those issues like face to face like that, it is very taxing on everybody to be in that situation, and they're not really in the right frame of mind to be doing the advocacy, I would say. So I that's another reason why you probably should separate the advocacy from the support and the services. But yeah, like for my, because of my parental alienation support, like I'm trying to offer a service and support that you know, and I am able to, the services for the Canadian Center for Men and Family, they have gone remote now. So except the only thing is like, so I can offer services for men for domestic abuse, for example, across Canada, because they can remote in and take it in a domestic abuse program at the CCMF in Ontario or Alberta or wherever. But but the family law is different in each province, so that's where I'm struggling, and that's like the main issue. So there's like so I think Alberta has some services, and so like I'm trying to collect services. So if you have any service organizations that you know, that was why I was looking at trying to find a list on, or so I could research that, and that way when I have a parent saying, oh, this happened, you know, I'm in this situation and I have like no money left, you know, the alienator is going to win. And basically they never even heard of the concept of self-representation. I just need to send people to a resource for their province or their territory that they can go to. And so, yeah, so I've been trying to collect as much as I can. I did find an organization in Quebec, and they have a different kind of family. And then there's ECMAS here in Alberta.
right.
That's quite quick. Like they are probably one of the best resources I found, you know, because they help people with all the paralegal stuff, and they kind of, you know, you can go in there and you talk to someone that's been through the process. And then there's Tom Maddie here in Alberta that he has a Mackenzie friend business actually, and he's great. Like I think he's doing an excellent job helping parents. And so there's a CCMF that opened up in British Columbia in Vancouver, so they would be able to help with that family law, but that would only be for men. So like I'm trying to think about everybody here, and trying to collect information and services. But like I said, it's so expensive for these parents to get help. And a lot of them don't know they can self-represent. They don't know how to self-represent. They don't even know what their rights are. And the system is set up so to keep them as ignorant and as scared and be as bullied as possible, basically. And so, yeah, but I think the forums and the Facebook group are helping because parents can talk to each other. Like they can share information, like especially if they're in the same region, like if they can get on a thread with another parent and then say, well, you know, there's this information, or, you know, and this, or, you know, but so that's helping, like getting people in one place to talk to each other about resources is helping. But there's definitely a lack of support services, and especially this issue doesn't affect just men, like it affects women. And so I actually think it's hard to find services for women for this issue.
Right. If I can suggest that, in fact, the federal government does actually have a directory that's online. If you look for it, I think it's under the Public Health Agency of Canada, Directory of Services for Women Who've Been Abused. Now, there's also,
but is that mostly for like domestic abuse, like, you know, like, and you know, I have some ideological differences with the status quo. Like actually the Canada stat shows that domestic abuse there's a lot of gender parity in that. And so but would those services, that directory that you're talking about, would that actually be for parental alienation? Because actually the feminist establishment that we have, which has a stranglehold over all of our institutions, actually denies parental alienation. So we have all these women that are victims of parental alienation. They're the targeted parents, but they can't get any help or support from the women in the establishment that, you know, the feminist establishment is actively denying it, because they're saying, oh, this is like a men's issues, and your help, you know, stop giving these men any kind of validity or whatever. That's what I'm hearing from the feminists, and they're actually in my group sometimes saying that kind of stuff. And so that's where I get into an argument with them. But yeah, so I'm at a loss for women, like how to help women with this. Because there's actually more
Right. Well,
services.
if I
for
can
support men.
suggest that in fact, the one thing I have found, and you're right that it is a bit of a gamble, but in fact, there are, and I think you'll find that the directory there, a lot of it is services that are related or connected to the women's shelter movement. Now, I wouldn't dismiss that completely because they are what I've discovered is I think the majority of the staff in women's shelters and these women's support services are actually want to do the right thing and want to provide that kind of support. But there is a small but significant percentage who do not want to have any issue and women having any support on parental alienation because they figure that it doesn't happen to women. It's all men who are
Abusers.
causing this or inventing it. So it becomes ideological. So my approach to this is to suggest, and we have a support group here in Ottawa where I am, and that largely their approach is to, in fact, to support both men and women, provide them with honest information, and that information may very well include references to, the women's shelter and associated somewhat ideological support services, because you can find some, good support services there. Now, I would have to say you have a similar but quite different problem with men in the sense that there's a directory, believe it or not, that the federal government has for services for men, but they don't put it on their website. They keep it a secret. So if you call the Public Health Agency of Canada and you say you heard about that directory of services for men across the country, and you'd like to get a copy of it, and you make a reasonable case for it, they should be able to send it out to you.
Okay.
But of course, most men, they're not being told about this.
I have had, like I've been involved with services for men, and a lot of these publicly funded services for both men and women, I find these special interest groups seem to have a stranglehold over the ideology that kind of delivers these services. So, example, like domestic abuse shelters are funded by public dollars, and they have to be approved by the establishment. And so these ideologues that have, so they would say a lot of these ideologues are adamant that men are perpetrators and women are victims in every situation. And so if they would go to a domestic abuse program, and then the man would be treated as a perpetrator, and and then the woman would be treated as a victim, right? So if they're, and that's not helping people with their actual issues. If these people have an ideology that, like a religion that they're thinking about, they're not actually helping people, that's not what the public dollars are supposed to be spent on. And so
right.
that's the problem that I'm having with all kinds of publicly funded services. And so that's why I support CAFE and CCMF, because it's all private donations of people that actually care and actually want people to get help with the actual issue.
Certainly, I support CAFE as well, and certainly support a number of other services that generally support both men and women and give them honest answers to their question, and honest explanation of what the situation is.
And sometimes when you have these ideologues, like they're really sure they're helping women, but then there'll be lesbians that come to the domestic abuse, like they want to get services, and it's two women that that have a domestic abuse problem, and they can't get service because they don't fit into this model of the man. So there's no intervention. So, and then like I said, like there's a lot of women that are being alienated and they don't fit into the model, like into the public ideology that has a stranglehold over our institutions. Like these alienated women are not supposed to exist, and so there's nothing for them. There's actually more for men, I would say, than there is for women, because like CAFE and CCMF is helping men, but these women, like I would say that men get ignored if they're being abused, like physically, or like if they're these victims are male, and for women it's these alienated moms that are not getting services because they don't fit.
You're absolutely right that this has become political and ideological, and government funding has made it so.
It's
A
awful.
lot of it that, well, uh, I can't fix all of those problems,
Yeah,
but
I'm just bringing it up because we do need to, I think having support services, because I'm helping these people in this group, I do want to have support services. And so that's why I brought up this, and I know it's not an easy problem to fix, but I do want to talk about like how we could get, maybe we could just narrow it down to parental alienation services that would be for everybody. Real services that actually acknowledge the problem. And so we have a political problem, like, because we have these special interest groups that deny that parental alienation even exists. And we have, so I don't see how we're going to get public dollars spent to get real help, real programs across the country for people, men and women, or any parent that's alienated from their children. If the establishment's not even get, they are like, like the Liberal Party, like you said, like they don't believe that this is a problem. And they have these aggressive lobby groups telling them that parental alienation doesn't exist. So, and so there's all these people that are left out in the cold, and a lot of children are suffering. They're the real victims here, and because of adult politics.
Right. Well, the problem is that, of course, the current federal government has been funding and massively increased the funding to these very one-sided ideological lobby groups.
Yes.
What I call the gender apartheid ideology.
And they think that women, they think they're helping women, but actually they're leaving a lot of women out in the cold. A lot of women are getting hurt, like lesbians and women that are alienated.
Right. Well, certainly, I think I try to take a fairly practical approach to support services, which is that, parents, if they're going through this sort of thing, and that's really my primary concern, is that they deserve and should get, honest reviews of what they're actually up against, as far as the situation in family court, what the processes are, what their choices are, how the system works. And in fact, they should be, I think, provided links to services such as there is a self-represented litigants group that works out of Windsor, Ontario, that's actually national and reviews.
So that would apply to all provinces?
Yes, because, well,
okay,
actually,
can you send me that link? Because that would actually be really helpful, because there's a lot of parents that need to self-represent. They run out of money. And so any resource to help the parents self-represent would be great if you could send that to me.
Right. This is a very important link. So
yes,
looking at this sort of thing, in fact, I might suggest that that's a bit of a model for parental alienation, in the sense that a center that deals with self-represented litigants and specializes in that and helping individuals who are going through that and giving them a sense of what the chances are, that's a really good approach.
okay.
And I think the same sort of thing for parental alienation. And I think, in a sense, that we've become a bit of a center for specializing in political change and how you motivate and train parents so that they can advocate for the changes that they need in order to stay in their children's lives.
Yeah, but a lot of these parents are like in the middle of a court battle and they're not ready to advocate yet. So we have to support. What I'm trying to do with Parental Alienation Canada is to help these parents get through their main problems, that they are stable, and that they, that they're at a spot where they're like zen enough. Like sometimes they won't be able to get custody of their kids, and that's very devastating. I have to get them in a spot where they are not focused on their own trauma, but focus on the trauma of their child, because that way, if the child is over 18, they can come back and just always leave that door open, basically, for the child. That's what I think. So, so there's, I don't know, that's what I'm trying to help with these parents too, is try to get them to, I encourage them to get help, like counseling. Like maybe if you can't win the court battle, then you can find a counselor to help you with your grief and your pain, and so that you are focused on the needs of your child, like, and if that child can come back to you. then you'll be ready to focus on your child's trauma. And that's, you know, because if you're an alienated parent and then your child wants to come back to you and all you want to talk about is your own trauma, like that's not going to help your child, and not going to help you have a relationship with your child again. So that's something that I think I'm trying to help parents with, supporting them. But yeah, so there's a bunch of factors about that, but there's just so many moving pieces, and there's like no information, and the establishment even denies parental alienation even exists. So, and there's such a big need. So it's just, it is an overwhelming problem. But I think it's great what you're doing for the advocacy, and I'm glad that someone's been organized enough to actually, and I think that we need to, you know, spread the word about what you're doing and get more public support and awareness of what you're doing.
Right.
Are you ready for
Well,
Q&A? When you're finished talking, sorry, I rambled on for a bit.
Yes, well, certainly your point that people who have an active case and are in the midst of it, they're generally not the type of people who should be taking on a political advocacy role. But if people have gone through it and then they've resolved or fought their case to a draw or have some sort of thing that they can live with, and they still have energy, and those are the people we want to come back if they want to and help us fight the political fight to fix it so that our children and grandchildren don't have to go through this.
Okay.
Ready
do we
for
have any? Yeah. Do we have any Q&A people that want to ask Glenn a question? I think Gerard had his hand up. Do you want to ask, Gerard?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess my question was who defines what is in the best interest of a child? Like, I keep hearing this, and I've been going through this since 2007 or 8, but everybody keeps telling me it's the best interest of the child, and it's like something they hide from or something. I can't see any definition anywhere.
Well, Gerard, you're absolutely right. There is really it's a standard without a standard. There's no real definition of best interest. Basically, it's, whatever
it's more of an opinion
that the judge wants to put on top of it. In fact, we've heard some absolutely outrageous definitions from judges. He said, look, I know the parents want this, but I'm going to overrule it. And then make my own ruling on here in the best interest of the child. And then the parents asked, the judge, what is your definition of best interest of the child? He says, well, whatever the parents decide. Now that's internally contradictory. So the problem is that it is absolutely meaningless. It's just an open vessel that judges can pour their own prejudices or frustrations into. And a lot of these cases are decided by who runs out of money or who manages to manipulate the process into establishing a de facto status quo. And we're trying to change the system so that parents keep their children unless they absolutely clearly have broken the rules. We want clear rules. So, the best interests of the child clearly in the social science, in the vast majority of cases, is keeping both parents in the lives of children. If you measure that by outcomes, it's very clear.
Does anybody else have a question for Glenn? Rhonda, do you have a question? You can turn off mute and talk, or go ahead, Rhonda.
You can hear me now. I have a couple of questions, please.
Can you speak up?
For our gentleman. I would like to know the new law, the changes to the Federal Divorce Act that were enacted on March the 1st. Which provinces are actually incorporating these new changes, and which?
Rhonda, I can't really hear you. Could you type it in? Like, your audio is really, really bad. Like, I can't hear anything you're saying. Could you type it in the chat, what your question is?
I don't know how to do that.
Well, Rhonda, I think I understood what your question was.
Can you repeat the question then?
Okay with it. I will try to respond. I think your question was regarding the new revisions to the Federal Divorce Act that came into effect on March 2021. The question really was, which provinces will that affect? Now, a little bit of, exactly. The thing is that it's essentially, you have to realize that the Canadian system is kind of a shared jurisdiction over family law. The Divorce Act and divorce and marriage essentially are federal under the federal law, but any common law relationship falls under the provincial legislation. And generally the provinces, with the exception of Quebec, try to line up their common law separation, common law marriage rules to the federal act, although it's complicated by the fact that supposedly the origin of the federal changes were in fact the changes to the BC Act that occurred, the BC legislation that goes back 7 or 8 years. So what you're talking about is they claim the system is all closely calibrated to work together. But of course, BC does something and then it takes 7 years for the federal government to put it into their law, and there's all sorts of changes. And the fact that, the judges, even though they're appointed federally, the administration of justice is all provincial. So the provinces have each of their own rules and their own procedures, so that there's a lot of room for variation in treatment. And in fact, there's a lot of variation even within a province. You may find that the judges in a rural part of, say, Alberta or Ontario are essentially, will make quite different judgments compared to those in the city. And you can get variations by judge from one judge to the other in different areas. So even though they pretend this is supposedly the same, there's a lot of things that make a real difference. Now, I think it's important, that people understand that the provincial governments, with the exception of Quebec, which has its own civil law approach to things, are all going to make some sort of differing effort to implement or have made to implement their version of the federal changes in their own provincial common law family law acts that are called something quite different across the country, with the exception, I guess, of probably BC that figures that they've already done it already. So it's about as complicated as you could possibly imagine, if not more so. So
if I speak directly into my microphone, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
I think there's a great lack of education regarding how to identify coercive and controlling violence. I believe that psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, judges, police, teachers really don't know what they're seeing, and they don't understand what they're seeing. And I believe that implementing a huge national education program would be very helpful, because, again, you may have some of these in the larger centers, but the smaller centers, the majority of family court judges in a particular province say that parental alienation simply doesn't exist. And the people they are relying on, the psychologists that they hire for their courts, don't know how to identify it. They've never been trained in it.
A lot of the problem is the ideology.
Really important, because this is truly how
we
we actually get people to begin to understand what's really going on.
Yeah, but the problem is that these special interest groups that control the universities and control our institutions, they put this film over our eyes, and that's why we don't see it. Like there's
Absolutely.
ideology that we've been trained to think our entire life, and these special interest groups are making a lot of money off the status quo, and they don't want us to see it. So we have to battle these special interest groups to stop brainwashing everybody.
And now that there has been a change in the Federal Divorce Act, pressure should be applied to universities to begin teaching these courses that they did used to teach before some strident groups had that stuff removed from universities.
Yeah, and I think just like expecting people to rely on real social like solid science, like peer reviewed social science, is a no more like ideology or just hearsay, and no repeating. Like I said, when I type in parental alienation, like the Google results that I get, like it's like the special interest groups are like this misinformation is out of control. Like they're saying that PA doesn't exist, and so the doctors and the lawyers and social workers that's what they see. And so yeah, so like and there's all these people suffering, you know, like I said, like the services and like the establishment doesn't match the actual need of what's going on with people, basically what I can see. And a lot of that, there's a big disconnect. And yeah, like, and it's very frustrating when I get into these, you know, altercations with these ideologues, because they're so sure that they're right. And you know, I think I don't think all these people are bad, but they, you know, they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're helping, you know, women or whatever, but being so anti-fact and like so anti-evidence, and like not wanting like real social science with peer reviewed, like relying on like social science and going back to like just, you know, old-fashioned standards that we used to have for research. So we used to demand like peer review, and you can, you know, like just because you're like very, you know, emotional doesn't mean that you're right. Like, you know, like we need to rely on facts and start doing what the evidence shows us.
And it comes down to the only way that you actually change the mindset of a society is simply through education. So
I think so, yeah.
I understand what your groups are doing, you know, trying to get laws changed, trying to get help for people when they go to court. But the point being, in a lot of courts, even if you go with all the truth and all the reality of what's going on, you're still going to be dealing with
amazing,
a completely biased setup, and they need to be educated.
Well, you know, I have been pushing Erasing Family I've been trying to get people to organize local screenings in their communities, because if they can, like, if we all like invite like social workers and stuff, and if they see the evidence, like they see real people talking about how they feel, like what this is doing to their families, and the long-term mental health problems, and like loss of family connections, like how devastating this is, you know, put all this dogma aside, this ideology aside, and look what it's doing to our families.
Yes, I understand. There are proper courses that have been set up years ago, and they're used around the world to train psychologists so that they know what they're seeing, to train doctors, to train teachers, for heaven's sakes, just to train anybody who's involved in making these tremendously important decisions that affect children's and families' lives.
But right now, the lobby groups are training, these lobby groups are training the psychologists and the judges and telling them this misinformation. And that's why they're acting the way they are. It's because they are under pressure from these lobby groups to, you know, believe in the ideology over the facts and over what is actually in the best interest of children. If two parents are in a high conflict divorce and spending $500,000, that's money they could be spending on their children's education. Like, how is this in the best interest of the children? Like for parents to be in a high conflict divorce like that for years and be broke.
I'm a grandma watching this happen.
Pardon me?
It's happening in my family.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions? Thanks, Rhonda. That was really great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Do you have any other questions we got about another quarter hour left.
I have another question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
Okay. The situation that my family finds itself in is that my child has been alienated from his children. And he still strives, and he's still there, and he's never going to give up. These children are really only getting information from one side. And the emotional and psychological abuse that they're sustaining is such that I've been told, please don't try to give the other side. It will cause them much more harm. So my question is, how do they ever get to know the whole truth if they're only getting a one-sided truth?
Well, a one-sided truth, Rhonda, is a lie.
That's right.
So all I can suggest is that in dealing with parental alienation, one of my heroes in fighting against it was a woman by the name of Pamela Stewart Mills.
Yeah.
She fought a parental alienation case, one of the first in Canada, and got a judgment by the judge Gomery, John Gomery. And he's the one who did the federal sponsorship scandal, the same judge. And the decision he made, I think, was important. He basically switched custody from her ex-husband to her because he said the children need to reestablish the relationship with their mother. They've been taught to hate their mother. You know, hating a child is not normal. For a child to hate a parent is not normal. It has to be taught. So in fact, you know, people may not realize that, in fact, what she was up against was her ex-husband, in fact, was working for the Mossad. So he was a spy, essentially. So there's probably no group that's more paranoid, more difficult to work with than if your ex was a Mossad agent. So she was up against probably the most difficult type of case. And she actually supported a lot of people as a result of a remarkable woman. So her idea, I think, as far as the approach to parental alienation, of reestablishing contact with the other parent, keeping the kids so that they can, in fact, have relationship with both parents. There may be times when they have to be isolated from one parent in order to establish balance in the parenting. So
What year was this case?
Oh, it goes back to the
This was in
early
BC,
90s,
correct?
80s,
This is in
late
BC.
80s, early 90s. I'm not sure the exact date. I'll have to look it up. But in fact, it's really something I think that people who are going through it, they need to be told, first of all, if you're being alienated, don't give up on your children.
That's right.
Right? It doesn't matter if the other parent is mentally ill, you still have to stay in there, because it's better that your children know that you fought for them. You did everything possible to keep the relationship, and then don't get dragged into, you know, trying to alienate your children from your ex, even though that's exactly what they're trying to do to you. And the same thing is true for, you know, alienated grandparents.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any
So
other questions?
I should mention
Okay.
that a lot of what we do is to pass on the experience, successful or not, of parents and into to other parents, and show them what works and what doesn't, as far as strategies in dealing with the current adversarial system. So
How would a
that's,
parent get that information from you? Like, can they just email you, or like on the Facebook group, I suppose? Can they on your Facebook group, can they talk to other parents?
yeah, we can talk with other parents. Of course, in the support group, it's a little more controlled in the sense that we try to give a little perspective, because the problem is that there are certain parents who claim that what they did worked perfectly and everyone else should do it and it'll always work for them. But in my experience, a lot of that is not realistic, or it's not the full picture.
And you're really more of an advocacy agency anyways.
Well, we are, an advocacy organization, but certainly, I've worked with a lot of support groups for parents.
Mhm.
And generally, I think it is better to keep them separate,
Yes.
because you don't want to be in a situation where you have a group of parents who need support and you're trying to recruit them as, political lobbyists.
It's not a
That
good
to me
idea.
is a conflict of interest.
But also there's a certain kind of presentation, as you said, that you need to do when you're a lobbyist. And a lot of these parents are understandably unstable, and they have been treated unfairly. And so they're prone, I find them, sometimes they're prone to very understandable outbursts of anger at losing their children. And they're probably not the best person to, kind of bite your tongue when you have to talk to a politician, that doesn't
Right.
understand.
Right. It's also a question of time too, because if you have somebody who has a current case, sometimes they figure that if they throw their energies 100% into political lobbying, that, they can fix the entire system in 6 months, and have their own case fixed too. But that's not realistic.
Oh, I've talked to so many parents that,
Realistically,
they think
takes
they think
years.
they're the ones that's gonna fix the whole system. They're like so sure, like they just started in on this, they just learned about this, and they think that they're the one that's gonna fix all this. And it's like, oh boy, it's been going on for decades. It's hard. It's a long, yeah, and I haven't given up. I think we can have shared parenting. We just need to get organized, and I think if we are not gonna get cooperation or understanding or compassion for our families from the establishment, then we have to do it. We have to organize ourselves and start educating each other and spread information laterally.
There's room for a lot of organizations. What it is important is that the advocates we have and the organizations that we have, we should certainly work together.
Yes, we need to work together. Sometimes people think that it's like a competition sometimes from one group to another, and it's like, no, we have enough opponents. We need to cooperate. Yeah,
Exactly.
this is not a competition. We need to work together.
It's kind of like the model of equal shared parenting. And that is two parents collaborating together in the best interests of the children.
Mhm.
It's not a war that, where one person is
Who's gonna
victorious
win.
and drives the other person out. So in the same sense, our organizations, we have to collaborate together on these issues in order to fix it for the kids.
Yes. I thought it was interesting you brought up grandparents, because that is often not brought up in parental alienation. There's a grandparents association that is part of your organization, that's a voting member.
Yes.
What do you think is, do you have any comments to make about grandparents? I mean, I think that's overlooked, and but I think there's one grandmother I can think of that actually succeeded in getting, she's in Manitoba, and she's like the only grandparent that actually got like a court order to have access to her kids. And she just talked about when she was there that when she was young, she got mail from her grandparents and she could feel the love from her grandparents. And she said call me old fashioned, I just want to write to my grandkids. I just want to send them stuff and know that they're loved by their grandparents. People, when they talk about parental alienation, they may not I don't know if they realize that the child actually loses like the whole side of that family, and like how devastating that is. They lose the support and the love of that. Like I think about my childhood and like the little gifts I got from my aunt, personalized gifts, and the trips and treats and things that they did to make me feel like I was part of the family and special, and that I'm part of the family. And when kids lose their grandparents, like how devastating is that?
Yes.
Really?
Well, certainly, I think the
Extended
one thing
family.
to recognize about grandparents that I find needs emphasizing is that grandparents often feel time pressure because they're getting older, so their time with their grandchildren is limited often by their lifespan. So the tragedy for grandparents is alienated from their grandchildren and they're getting old and their health is not great, and they're worried that they're going to die without ever seeing their grandchildren or see their grandchildren grow up. And that is truly sad.
That's really hard.
So,
And sometimes these kids, if they've been alienated, they think that side of the family doesn't love them or doesn't want them. They've been brainwashed to believe that. They think that they're not wanted.
right. Well,
Not
sometimes
true.
they're directly told that. Sometimes the kids, and this is a common problem in divorce, is that, you know, kids think that, oh yes, well, it must have been something that I did to the reason why, you know, the family broke up. So it's really important, I think, for parents to work together to show the kid that, you know, even though the parents may get divorced, the kids are not getting divorced from either parent. And that's part of the strength of equal shared parenting, is that parents working together. And gradually this actually does work out better. There's less conflict as the parents increasingly work together. In fact, if you start off with equal shared parenting, then it is much more likely that the conflict is reduced over time, and you have substantially reduced domestic violence, reduced conflict. So what the other side has been saying, that joint custody or shared parenting produces conflict, is exactly the opposite. The current system produces the conflict.
Mhm. Okay, I'm just going to show, we're just coming to the end of our session here. So I'm just going to show my screen. I'm going to show the erasing, the Parental Alienation Canada Facebook group one more time.
Sure.
And then, thank you so much, Glenn. That was really great.
Yeah,
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you for
Glenn.
doing
You had amazing information to share with us today. And the questions were great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
So yeah, so this is the group. It's small, but it's growing. It's Parental Alienation Canada. As I talked before, I'm trying to offer something a little more robust than what I've seen before. It's not just an awareness. It's actually like an active support group. We have forums of people, and I try to offer good information, and have events with good information with thought leaders like Glenn Cheriton, and I'm capturing all this information by recording it and trying to spread the information laterally so that we can spread awareness. And so if you want to come join our group, anyone who's in, as long as you don't deny that parental alienation exists, you're welcome in the group. And just stay respectful. We have really great, I think we have good moderation. We have good admins that work in the group. And so we don't allow spam or advertisements. We don't have anything like that, because we don't want people selling their products and taking advantage of our parents that are already often they've already pretty broke from family law, so they're already hurting. So yeah, we're just trying to offer support here and offer a service. So come join us here if you wish. And thanks again. Glenn, do you want to have the last word today?
Well, thank you everyone who attended, and thanks for the questions. And thank you, Monique, for the work that you've been doing. It's
okay,
important.
Glenn, we'll stay in touch, and I'm so glad I got to talk with you today. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.